Hey y'all. Today I have a rather special video for you on a topic that probably most of you had no idea even existed. And this is the concept of Scientologists on TikTok, or Scientology talk, if you will. Now, these videos are few and far between, although I will say they are probably the cringiest low effort videos you have ever seen in your life. So this video is going to be rather painful for both of us, okay? But we'll get there. We'll get through it together, you and I. How about that? So won't you join me in this just absolute shit show? Now, the first video we have is one of Scientology's own propaganda arms that does a lot of awful work as far as creating the idea that anyone who disagrees with Scientology or criticizes Scientology is a bigot, or somehow that Leah Remini, because she had bad experiences in Scientology and spoke out about it, that she's some sort of pariah or psychotic neo-Nazi. Okay? Now, the main offender here is an organization known as Stand, or the Stand League. I'll show you some pictures of some of their social medias here, but what you should know about this is that this is probably 3 or 4 individual Sea Org members sitting in a booth running multiple Twitter accounts, and this includes something called the Expose Network, which I've recently found out about, and their sole purpose is to create excruciatingly cringy and hateful content designed to trick the general public into having negative opinions of anyone who speaks out against Scientology. And they do this by either lying outright, because that's what they're good at. They do this by deflecting attention from them onto others who they deem as lesser people. But there are so many contradictions here, okay? And I'm wasting a lot of time explaining this, so let's just get into it, shall we? And I'll explain as we go. The first TikTok we have is by the Expose Network on TikTok, and it seems like this is just a reposting of, I believe, a Scientology TV ad commercial. Scientology TV is just a giant propaganda stream that runs 24/7, and in between they'll have these little fake Google searches where they ask themselves questions, and then they'll answer their question. This is sort of the template for that. Okay, so let's see what they say. So the question was, does Scientology believe in God? And the answer they had is most definitely. Oh God. In Scientology, the concept of God is expressed as the eighth dynamic, the urge toward existence as infinity. This is also identified as the supreme being. That's a quite subjective interpretation, I'd say, but this is propaganda, in fact, so we'll get into where this is false in a second. As the eighth dynamic, the Scientology concept of God rests at the very apex of universal survival. This could not be more of a misdirection if it tried. Now, Scientology does have these 8 urges towards survival that they call the 8 dynamics. There would be 1, which is self; 2, which is sex, family, and the rearing of children, or the raising of children. That's a really weird grammar there. 3 would be groups. 4 would be mankind. 5 would be all life. 6 would be the physical universe. 7 would be urge towards survival as you as a spiritual being. And 8th is known as the existence towards infinity, but the emphasis is not on a God, okay? They do not believe in a creator, okay? Even in a book that L. Ron Hubbard wrote called The Factors, there was no God. There was simply, it starts, I think, with something like, in the beginning there was cause, and by that cause there was an effect. But it's still very vague. As a matter of fact, later in his research, L. Ron Hubbard draws about the fattest line he could in the sand when it comes to whether or not there's a God. But despite higher level Scientologists believing that, we are all spiritual beings that are in bodies that are covered with these little bodies that were blown up in volcanoes during an incident called Incident 1 and 2, which is the Xenu story, where he was a galactic overlord who lured people in for tax audits to stop overpopulation, and when he lured them in, he knocked them out and froze their bodies and put them in planes and flew them to Earth, or as he calls it, Tigiak, and, dropped them into volcanoes and blew them up with hydrogen bombs. And when their souls escaped, he captured their souls, put them into little movie theaters and showed them videos of, religious iconography and sexual stuff. I don't know, it's very vague. In the actual text, it's very sort of ridiculous. I haven't really retained it to memory. But this is what you learn on OT3, which is a fairly expensive level. So it's not without reason that many Scientologists will deny this, because it's confidential. So Scientology doesn't really believe in a god, but more that we are all gods in our own right, and we have simply forgotten our godly powers. And through Scientology, and only Scientology, will we be able to reobtain our godly powers and our godly status. Funny enough, quite the opposite in Scientology's origins can be found to be true, as L. Ron Hubbard was a known associate of a man named Aleister Crowley, who was a pretty famous Satanist, as well as gave L. Ron Hubbard a lot of insight into how to control people. And I'm sure he assumed it was some kind of magic, but it's mostly reduced in observation to a sort of assertive hypnosis when it comes to auditing. Let me read for you a passage from the OT3 series. For those of you whose Christian toes I may have stepped on, let me take the opportunity to disabuse you of some lovely myths. For instance, the historic Jesus was not nearly the sainted figure he has been made out to be. In addition to being a lover of young boys and men, he was given to uncontrollable bursts of temper and hatred. You have only to look at the history his teachings inspired to see where it has all inevitably leads. It is historic fact, and yet man still clings to the ideal. So deep and insidious is the biological implanting. He continues, no doubt you are familiar with the Revelation section of the Bible, where various events are predicted. Also mentioned is a brief period of time in which the arch enemy of Christ, referred to as the Antichrist, will reign and his opinions will have sway. This Antichrist represents the forces of Lucifer, literally the light bearer or light bringer, Lucifer being a mythical representation of the forces of enlightenment. My mission could be said to fulfill the biblical promise represented by this brief Antichrist period. Now, before I continue, I'll say that it is a massive propaganda tool for Scientology to say that they are non-denominational, which in actual fact would make them ineligible for tax exemption. Mike Rinder posted about this on his blog. At one point, the Church of Scientology was asked by the IRS if they were in fact non-denominational, because this would disqualify them from being a religious organization exempt from taxes by the U.S. Now, in response to this, Scientology actually wrote a paper declaring that Scientologists, although they may come from many different backgrounds, are eventually expected to abandon those backgrounds in favor of Scientology, the one true religion. And despite what you'll hear some people say, I'm a Christian and a Scientologist, these people are very sort of dipping their toes into a much bigger pool, if you will. They are not privy to the truth, because the Church of Scientology as an organization simply lies. This is so lost on so many people. I'm actually surprised at how easy it is for them to just lie and then wait out any questions without response while people's attention spans sour and they move on to the next thing, In fact, one of Scientology's most revered policies, called Keeping Scientology Working, has a passage that almost guarantees that anyone who is involved in this cult put all of their attention on it and nothing else, as it is a, quote, deadly serious activity that you are involved in. So whereas they are being cute by putting a cute little song and graphic over this is just an outright lie. It's a short video, but I felt the need to express my opinion on it and really just show you the data myself. Let's continue, shall we? No culture in the history of the world, save thoroughly depraved and expiring ones, has failed to affirm the existence of a supreme being. It is an empirical observation that men without a strong, lasting faith in a supreme being are less capable, less ethical, and less valuable to themselves and society. A man without an abiding faith is, by observation alone, more of a thing than a man. Yeah. This is said by a man who literally founded a cult and claimed himself the source of all superior knowledge. So who is he trying to convince? maybe people with money. We're moving on. I think this is find out more. Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So that's just like a cute little thing that they try to do. Very laughable. But we'll just move on to the next one. The next one we have is from the Stanley. Ooh, let's see what this Scientologist has to say about discrimination.
In America, we are so harsh and so severe with people who bully people, with discrimination, with discriminating against people because of their sexual preference, with discriminating against people because of their race. And that's one of the things that makes us a beautiful country is everyone is free to practice what they're going to practice.
The way she says that makes me think she's happy that she gets to discriminate against people, but that's there's already so much wrong with this video.
You're free to do with your body what you want to do with your body. You're free to practice whatever religion you want, or spirituality is left up to the person. But somehow with Scientology, it's okay to discriminate against us. It's okay to bully Scientologists. It's okay to treat us poorly because we're Scientologists. And I've experienced that because of Leah Remini and the things that she's spewing and the lies that she's forwarding.
Okay, I have seen this video before, and I cringed so much harder, but it is so hard to watch. Okay, let's take it back right here. When she says,
bully people with discrimination, with discriminating against people because of their sexual preference.
Great example, corporate shill purchased by the cult. This is a Sea Org member. Highly likely that this is just a Sea Org member who took off her uniform and put on a sweater. Let's address what Scientology has to say about sexual discrimination, shall we? In Scientology, there are a few books that cover the topic of homosexuality, and to illustrate L. Ron Hubbard's specific views, I'll read from an academic source which fully observed the situation. I have personally observed the situation as well as read these materials, but I'm just going to let this speak for itself. In 1950, Hubbard published Dianetics, the Modern Science of Mental Health. Introducing his Science of the Mind, Dianetics, he classified homosexuality as an illness or a sexual perversion, citing contemporary psychiatric and physiological textbooks to support his view. Hubbard further defined perversion in his 1951 book, The Science of Survival, Prediction of Human Behavior, when he introduced the concept of the tone scale, a means of classifying individuals and human behavior on a chart running from plus 40, the most beneficial, to negative 40, the least beneficial. Sexual perversion, a category in which he included homosexuality, was termed covert hostility and given the score of 1.1. The level of the pervert, the hypocrite, and the turncoat, the subversive. He considered such people to be skulking cowards who yet contain enough perfidious energy to strike back, but not enough courage to ever give warning. The 1.1 is sort of or the 1.1 as you would hear it called, is sort of like the snake in the grass, the man who smiles with a knife behind his back in Scientology. It's so vague that anyone who seems to have a double meaning in their speak, or seems to have have relinquished sort of concern or conflict to be nice, is also seen as 1.1. This is also considered in people who are saying one thing and doing another, much like your average Scientologist. Hubbard says homosexuals don't practice love. 1.1s cannot. Their relationships consist of brief, sordid interpersonal meetings, or longer arrangements punctuated by dramatic triads, discords, jealousies, and frequent infidelity. It could hardly be otherwise, since the tone is made up of suspicion and hate, producing a darling sweetness interspersed with petty peevishness. Their love turns to deep contempt eventually. It's actually funny because L. Ron Hubbard's son, Quentin, was homosexual, and according to a guy named John Atack, L. Ron Hubbard had repeatedly announced that his son Quentin would succeed him after his death, but Quentin died of an apparent unaliving in 1976. I can't imagine that L. Ron Hubbard, finding out that his son was homosexual, sat too pretty with him. In January 1951, the Dianetic Research Foundation of Elizabeth, New Jersey, published Dianetic Processing, a brief survey of research projects and preliminary results. a booklet providing the results of psychometric tests conducted on 88 people undergoing Dianetics therapy. It presents case histories and a number of X-ray plates to support claims that Dianetics had cured aberrations including bipolar disorder, asthma, arthritis, colitis, and overt homosexuality, and that after Dianetic processing, test subjects experienced significantly increased scores on standardized IQ tests, blah, 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 blah. That is total conjecture, because LRH made up his own IQ tests. So, yeah, he can kind of decide the results however he wants to. Actually, in the handbook for pre-clears, there are set out instructions to, quote, cure homosexuality. Now, L. Ron Hubbard specifically believed that homosexuality was a sort of childhood trauma, a continuation on the dominant parent of the household. So let's say if you were a boy and your mother was the dominant, you would sort of continue the female presence in her stead based on some kind of trauma. And if you were a woman and your father was dominant, you know, your daddy issues would make you a gay. Not only is this objectively ridiculous, there is no basis in fact for even the smallest of his claims in this region. It was once stated that Dianetics, the first book L. Ron Hubbard wrote, had more claims per page as compared to evidence than any other academic book in human history. So you see, when you're inundated with all these claims and you don't have an academic background, or perhaps you have a history of being distrustful of certain academic sources, it's easy for you to kind of just ignore the fact that there is no evidence and just take his word for it, especially if you're a homophobe. I remember my mother telling me that my dear friend, who I later found out was gay, was in fact aberrated, and they made fun of him and they joked around, and I found myself coming to a crossroads at one point, finding out that he was gay, not being sure if I could associate with such an aberrated individual. However, I thought about it for a brief time and decided that his friendship was more important than who he decided to love. We are still friends to this day, and we kind of laugh about it now because it's such a bizarre, macabre thing to reflect on, that this cult that had poisoned my mind had almost torn apart our friendship because of this very insignificant detail. So the audacity of Scientology to put this white woman on camera to say some dumb shit is just, to me, as someone who was in her position, very obviously just like a you're a fucking dumbass if you don't just believe blindly everything we say. Do not be fooled by these people, okay? Don't let their semantics confuse you, all right? No one's stoning Scientologists in the streets, okay? The problem is not these individual people who may mean well. The problem is the way the group's founder, L. Ron Hubbard, and subsequent management acts in their disregard for the rules of law, human decency, and how the individual members identify with the leader to such a degree that individual Scientologists are led to attack and hate at the discretion of universal laws within the lore of their religion. Okay? Chill. So, it is not you. It is the cult on behalf of you. Does that make sense? You are not a bigot if you have a problem with Scientology. You have a problem with Scientology, and therefore you are a bigot. There is just no other way to put that. Does that make sense?
Experienced that because of Leah Remini and the things that she's spewing and the lies that she's forwarding that are just false. They couldn't be farther from the truth. If you've studied Scientology at all, you know that none of this stuff is true.
Which is a funny segue into how, you see, even then there's sort of a call to action in, well, you should study Scientology and you should give us money so that you can then prove to yourself that it is true, you know, because you're studying it. But, you know, by that point, you're already hooked. It's pretty psychotic. Not to mention, Scientology actually, as an ideology, forbids them from being victims, okay? The common phrase you'll hear from Scientologists internally when you say you've been mistreated or abused is, you are responsible for everything that happens to you, which is not uncommon in cults to have that sort of self-policing mindset. Yet despite this, you'll find these people are literally cosplaying victims against their own personal beliefs, like some cringy, fucked up performance art. The real irony is that they are victims and that they do need help. But I digress. All right, we got a part 2.
This is a group of people who hate Scientologists doing a documentary about Scientology. It's like getting a group of neo-Nazis together to do a program on Judaism. These people...
Oh, she said it. She said it, not me. I didn't say it. She said it. Okay. Let's hold on. Let's just. It stings every time. It hurts physically.
People hate Jews.
Sorry, what'd she say?
These people hate Jews. So somehow this is okay because it's Scientology and Scientologists. But if it was Judaism or Christianity or Buddhism, people would be outraged. But because it's Scientology, it's okay. It's criminal.
Ladies and gentlemen, oh, there's so much to unpack there. Okay, not only does she compare Scientology to Holocaust victims, but she compares people who do not like Scientology to neo-Nazis. Okay? Think of this logic for a second. I want you to just, it's an extreme comparison, and you've heard it before. Okay? But just think of this comparison, okay? What do you think this woman thinks about people who make documentaries about neo-Nazis? Would we consider them bad people? Are those people who bring light to the atrocities committed by the Nazis in World War II considered evil because there was only speculation from those who were biased and bigots? You hear what I'm saying? Or perhaps was there a totalist group committing unjust actions that they justified under their own dogmas and doctrines, defined by a singular leader who made them believe they were the good guys? Okay? The idea that anyone who questions Scientology is a bigot has, in the statement, the assertment of the unquestionable loyalty to the ideals of Scientology. And in this case, to such a degree that to her, it is a fact that Scientology can do no wrong, and anyone who thinks so is a bigot. The question is not, people are hating Scientology's beliefs, and Scientologists are free to believe whatever they want, and they do, trust me. But to go out of your way to respond to allegations that your cult has been engaged in criminal activity or harassment that you simply pretend, fucking motherfucker, that you simply pretend doesn't exist or refuse to look at because it's all part of some big cult conspiracy where big pharma is blah, 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 blah. You respond to allegations by saying you're a bigot because you don't let me believe what I want to believe. It's okay to be religious, all right? Thoughts and actions, these are two separate things, all right? Words are also representative of actions, but she's comparing herself and her cult to Holocaust victims, people who were genocided. Nobody's killing Scientologists faster than Scientology is, let me tell you. There are more Scientologists who unalive themselves every day than there are Catholic priests who touch little boys. And now, not to say that that's not still horrible, these aren't apples and oranges we're comparing here. These are totalist groups that use coercive manipulation to control and abuse people, okay? And this shill of a woman who has literally no social media, because why would you be able to contact a person when you can sit a billion-year contract signing drone, slave, essentially. You can sit them up in a chair and put a camera in front of them and just say, read this list that David Miscavige wants you to read. She'll do whatever David Miscavige wants without a second word because his word is law. So this was just infuriating to me. Let's move on, shall we? Because my brain is already melting. We got John Prescott here, who I have heard of as kind of a wild card. I think he's, somewhere on the spectrum, which isn't a problem. Also, don't attack these people. Attacking them directly does not help. It does not work in the sense of helping them find truth for themselves, or to help them. It doesn't help in that way, in the way you think it does. You can try to enlighten them, or you can kind of appeal to them, but they're lost. They're going to have to find it for themselves. It's not your responsibility to save them. If you want to help them, spread the true information about Scientology that you find with people in Scientology. That's about the best way you can help them. But this guy's a bit of a he writes like a bunch of crazy books on Scientology and reviews on other critical of Scientology books. He's kind of a wild card, but I thought to include him would be relevant because there's not too many Scientologists on TikTok.
It makes me laugh when somebody says Scientology is some secret religion, because if you just look at the placement of the buildings, the churches, all around the world. They're in public locations. They have windows all over the buildings.
They have guys. Scientology's not secret. They have windows. Would a building with windows be secretive? Come on, guys.
Open for tours, like amazing. Like every day they're open for tours, as well as their materials have been available since the '60s. And bookstores,
The 50s.
libraries, you name it. Even churches. You walk into a church. I mean,
Even
it makes me laugh.
even churches. I fucked up the video. Even churches, he says. So you can walk into any church and just read Scientology, can't you? He's overcompensating, right, for his lack of understanding on the higher bridge, which is okay. But when you look at the bridge to total freedom, which is all the services given in Scientology, they literally say confidential right up there at the top, and anywhere above clear, even the way you get to clear is confidential. So you have to say this clear cognition, which is I've created my own reactive mind and it no longer can affect me anymore. You say that to your local Scientology auditor if he also is clear, and most likely you'll get yourself a fresh new clear bracelet pretty soon. No, but there's sort of an overestimation of effort here when he's trying to protect them. He's sort of saying things that feel right when they are not so, So, but there are many points in Scientology that are very confidential. If you go into Scientology and say, hey, what's the process of OT3? Can you show me the materials? They will say, no, that is confidential.
As well as their materials have been available since the '60s. And bookstores, like you can walk on into a church, get your questions answered, walk on out feeling like, oh yeah, I got my questions answered, thank you. You don't need to become a member to walk into a church, and there's no donation requested or required.
Or required, he specifies. Thank you, Ryan. It will be requested, but you don't have to. You don't have to do any Scientology if you don't pay for it, but you can request it.
As you walk into a church and kind of find out information for yourself. It's not secret. It's super open. And if you have any questions, comment below. Thank you.
Okay. So Ryan seems like a bit of an oddball, but he doesn't know what he doesn't know. And that's the main, issue with Scientology, is that the individual members don't know what they don't know because of how early on you're indoctrinated to the suppression tech or their ethics and justice system, which so clearly outlines that Scientology knows and will define who is toxic and who is not toxic. Conveniently, these all align with what L. Ron Hubbard says is toxic and non-toxic, like psychiatry, and anyone who is critical of any part of Scientology or L. Ron Hubbard's work or methods. So people have issue with that, clearly. But if you think you're in a group where you have been convinced that they are the most ethical group in the universe and the most advanced group that's derived from 40,000 years of religious understanding and culminated into one philosophy, it's like, says who? The guy who made it. The guy who claims to be the source of all superior knowledge. You see why people think it's a cult. I mean, it is a cult, but from your perspective as a Scientologist, you blind yourself in order to protect yourself, okay? So you, in fact, do not know what you do not know. It is not a matter of are you right or are you wrong. It's what are you refusing to acknowledge. Does that make sense? Now, might not be too many Scientologists watching this. I know there's a couple people at OSA who are definitely watching this. But again, I don't like not explaining the little details. You know what I mean? I don't like just trolling them for the sake of trolling, although it is chef's kiss to make a Scientologist seethe with hatred after they just told you that you're the one who is hateful. It's sort of this bizarre, mirror that they put up where it's like they're allowed to hate and be awful and say terrible things as long as it's to someone who is known as a suppressive or someone who is critical of Scientology. Which brings me to this next TikTok. And hold on, boys and girls, this one's rough. So what we have here is somebody arriving at the airport, a declared SP, and they are being confronted by a group of Scientology executives. Now, this is what you can expect if you grew up in Scientology. This is what you can expect to hear from your friends and loved ones if you speak out against any abuses that the church has committed against you, or members of the church committed against you. If you expose the church in a negative light publicly, this is what you can expect.
committing suppressive acts. Full-time suppressive acts. Why don't you get a life with zero effect? None, and nobody gives a fuck about you. That's the truth.
Those eyes, man.
Nobody has even noticed you're gone, man. Nobody. You're nothing. That's the point. You're nothing.
No comm cycle. Is that what you learned?
Brilliant.
Nope.
Your
No
TRs
comm
are
cycle.
Brilliant.
No comm cycle. What that means, a comm cycle is just another word for conversation. It just means there's some part of the cycle of communication, which is L. Ron Hubbard's pinnacle to communication technology, that you are not applying, and therefore you are a bad person. Because you're a bad Scientologist, you're a bad person. That's another part of the whole cult thing.
Why don't you just stop committing suppressive acts and live a real life? What's he doing in LA anyway? What are you doing in LA? Why are you here?
What?
Why don't you just end it and start living a decent life and do something to help mankind? Since you guys do nothing to help mankind, for you, Mike, it's pathetic. You guys are embarrassing and pathetic.
I love this idea that Scientologists are the only one who's helping mankind, because they don't give a fuck about mankind. They do not give a single fuck about the poor, or there's no Scientology soup kitchens. Their community centers are still pay to play kind of endeavors, just like the churches. It's this sort of like hyper overestimation. They think that the wavelengths of their spiritual effort cleanse negativity from the world. Okay, it's goofy, to say the very least, but it doesn't actually equate to anything. They take what they need to gain immortality, okay, as a selfish act, and to them becoming, I guess, spiritually pure, it sort of like manifests good in the world, right? It's very gross. I think the guy that they're bullying is Marty Rathbun, who actually went back to Scientology, probably because he was too much of a pussy to stand by his word and, stand with the people who actually helped him and trusted him. He instead had to cower back into the arms of people who control him and basically own him now. He has no life left. He's done a lot of recounting, and he's basically gone back on, whether he gave a shit initially or not. He helped make a few documentaries against Scientology, and then subsequently, I guess, felt lonely. And instead of getting therapy or trying to move on at all, he just said, "Oh, I can't take it. I can't take it anymore," and went back to the cult, which is his fucking prerogative. It's very sad, but pathetic, if you ask me. Especially when they treat him like this. You know what I mean? Would you want to hang out with these people? Comment down below if you want to hang out with these people. If you want to go to this woman's house for dinner, comment below.
Pathetic. Disgusting. And it's all over your face. Yep. Terrible.
Brilliant.
These are embarrassing. Why don't you do something with your life? You're an embarrassment. An embarrassment to the fact that you were ever connected to us. An absolute embarrassment that you ever were connected.
This chick reminds me of my mom. This is kind of how my mom acts.
Has no effect. Nobody cares. Nobody's interested. You've done nothing. You have some movement. It's a goddamn joke. No one gives a crap. Okay?
She clearly doesn't give a crap. She clearly does not care at all. Oh, she cares so little that she drove to the airport and busting capillaries in her face. Her arteries are about to burst out of her body. She's about to bleed out her eyes. She doesn't care.
Can you move on, please?
I've moved on, and the church has been better.
Can you guys move on, please?
Anyway, psychotic people. Not all of them, but many of them. This next video is from a guy named Frank on TikTok. I follow him. He has some pretty good videos. I saw that he had a video on Scientology, so I wanted to add that and see if we could react to it.
Scientology is the most successful modern-day cult. They are one of the very few business entities who are able to make the IRS back down. Everyone knows it's a sham. It's mostly used for like tax avoidance and scamming people out of their money.
True.
When the IRS was investigating people in Scientology, Scientology started going after individuals, like personally after the people who work there, their families, their personal lives. Just pretty amazing stuff.
They actually also had New York Times articles taken out on these individual people, saying a lot of slander and hearsay to try to coerce people that not only was the IRS untrustworthy, but that these individual people were like evil only because they were critical of the nature of Scientology. And David Miscavige did a beautiful lie campaign about all of these things, but so far Frank is he's right on the money with this one.
There was some news a couple of years ago about how they had like a bunch of slaves on these ships in international waters, actual modern day people in slavery.
Basically, yeah. I think he's talking about the free winds, where people there are more or less not obligated to be paid, but they are to constantly be on their duties and scrubbing the ships and scrubbing the engine rooms in 100+ degree temperatures constantly, as the ship actually, it was also recently discovered to be covered with blue asbestos, which is highly toxic and cancerous. Yeah, they basically own these people essentially, and they do whatever Scientology asks of them.
Scientology is actually banned in a couple of countries, rightfully so. Unfortunately, the US is not one of them. This is honestly probably the most dangerous video I've made. Like, who knows if they'll come after me.
Frank, I think you'll be okay. They actually haven't sued anyone in close to 20 years. So David Miscavige has gotten pretty soft in his obsessive narcissism. So I think you'll be okay. All right, one more, and we'll call this. Let's see what we got here. Oh, guys, I think my brain just broke. This was a mistake. Please stay safe, people. Okay? Anyways, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, if you like the TikTok review, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you want to see another one. I'm working on a few other videos. And I got a really, really good interview coming up pretty soon that I do not think you're going to want to miss at all. It's going to be incredible. I've been waiting for it for a long time. And if you're like me and you like video games, check out my gaming channel that I'll post right here. I'm also streaming on Twitch now and then, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram to stay up to date on when I do that. If you want. If you don't want, that's fine, but it's up to you. All right, y'all. Catch you in the next one. Peace.
Know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. Know that they ride or die. I keep boys by my side. Day we hustle, but the night we